welcome to the Intuitively Wild podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Levine. Living intuitively wild is about coming back home to ourselves. Here, we talk about how to live connected to ourselves, others, and nature, and make a commitment to radical authenticity, vulnerability, and acceptance. On this podcast, we delve into a wide range of topics that span the human experience. We peel back the layers and talk about the things that are often not talked about. This is a space for us all to walk and wander this path of life together. Let's dig into our roots and go deep. This has been one of those conversations that I've just been looking forward to for so long because I just admire you so much. I've been able to work with you in the creative living group that I did, and I've just loved learning from you. So now having this conversation feels really special. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I feel the same.
First question, what is something you wish people knew about you that you don't think many do?
Oh, that's such a good question. You know what? I love that you asked this because I was just thinking about this. I haven't written it yet, but I was thinking about writing a Substack probably for next week. I was thinking recently that not many people know my whole story. Lots of people know my professional story. Lots of people know that I've been writing for a while, but not many people know where I'm from and how I grew up and what my parents do and kind of more of my like background, which I feel like honestly directly has impacted everything I've done, everything I do, how I hold spaces, how I lead. So I can share a little bit about that.
Please.
The thing that I think is important about my background or my upbringing is that I was broke growing up. I had no money. I had no I came from a blue collar Northern English. My ancestry is all Irish, and if you go back sufficiently enough in my family lineage, it's all gypsies and Irish kind of, I don't want to use the word witches because who knows, but I feel like that is probably in my history somewhere. I think there are certain stories that you adopt when you come from that kind of life. My mum wanted to be an actress, then wanted to be a writer, ended up doing some editing, but always kind of lived of this belief that oh well, if you're not born with money, this was very much a thing in the 90s. Growing up in the 90s is oh, if you're not born with money, you don't really get to do what you want. You don't really get to follow your heart. Artists don't make money and all of this kind of rhetoric that I sort of grew up with. A lot of it wasn't conscious. A lot of it wasn't you shouldn't. I definitely had a childhood where it was you can do whatever you want, but there was always this undertow of like, but we aren't those people and we aren't kind of given, we're not really given opportunities and we're not really we're the kind that have to graft and work hard and money is bad and people with money are bad. There was all of these kinds of undertows in all of the sort of communities and spaces that I was in as a much younger person. And so I really think that influenced a lot of, it definitely influenced me going into advertising. I always wanted to write. It was absolutely 100%, no question, that's what I was going to do. But the older I got and the more I realized, I don't like this kind of poverty and having no money and raising children in an environment where, if they need £1 for, I don't know, a school trip, we can't afford it. That stops with me. That's going to end here. No matter what, I'm going to change that story somehow. That's where I turned and went into advertising because I was like, well, I can write over there, but at least I'll make money. I can see a future vision or a better vision where I can be creative and I can also make money and I don't have to live this story for the rest of my life. So that's something that I want to start talking about more because I feel like in the world that we live in now, certainly in the last 5 or 6 years, I feel like it's important that people understand that even if you're not sort of handed the life that you want, and even if you kind of grow up with stories of hardship and sort of led to believe whether consciously or unconsciously, that things are just naturally hard for people like you, no matter what sort of background or life you come from, that you can choose differently. One thing that I wish I had kind of learned or known earlier on is that you absolutely can make money as a creative person. You absolutely can make money as a writer. It is absolutely 100% possible for you. You don't have to have been born differently or have financial backing. Like, that is possible for you. And I wish I hadn't made so many choices based on, I just don't want to be poor anymore. And I hope to give that freedom to my kids. I hope, the older I get and the older they get, that I hope that I can give them some kind of foundation so that they don't have to make those kinds of decisions on pure survival. But I think that is something that I want to start talking about more. I think that is something that people need to know about me, is a little bit more about my history and a little bit more about my background and the kind of stories and the kind of women and the kind of lifestyle that I grew up in. Northern England, especially in the town that I grew up in, the sort of northwest of England is a very Irish history. A lot of people in England are Irish or have Irish heritage or ancestry because over the years, a lot of Irish people have moved over to like Liverpool and Manchester. Ireland's history is like very, very working class. Some of the stories that I've heard from even my grandmother about her parents and, my great granddad, the father of my grandmother, was one of 11 children and they had no money, and the dad was a potato farmer and he kind of fought and worked and battled and just sort of broke himself in two to like move to England and build a new life. I'm starting to appreciate that more the older that I get, like all of the hard work and effort that went into who I became and where I grew up, and all of the beliefs that I now, looking back, realize that my mum subconsciously adopted and probably impacted her belief of whether she could be an actress or whether she could go and write books. And my mum is a brilliant, talented, gifted writer. And I think there's lots of things there that prevented her from believing that she could do that. And I'm starting to connect these dots more now. So that's something that I'm going to start talking about more and exploring more for myself in my own writing, definitely.
Wow, there's so much there that I want to speak to. First of all, thank you so much for sharing. And I think it is so important to talk about because, one, I love the energy with which you're speaking to it because it can be easy for us to look back on these, let's say, woundings or stories from our ancestors or family members that have negatively impacted us or just caused us to show up in life in a certain restrictive way and just deem it all as negative or unhelpful and like this family trauma that we need to heal. But what I'm hearing in you is just this acceptance and
Yeah.
curiosity and also the beauty in where you've come from
Yeah.
and how it connects you to your family and just wanting to know more about that and how that has impacted you. And that's been part of my exploration with my family lineage as well. And even the parts that have shown up in our lives and reverberated in maybe a way that isn't as positive is still something to be curious about and accept because it's
100%.
shaped who we are, you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely. And also, I have a whole different level of understanding of the whys now. I get why you made that decision, or I understand why you ended up in the place that you did. You don't have to go that far back in someone's history, particularly in England, sort of the late 1800s, where like life was completely different for women. Thinking about even just recent history, how that would have impacted my grandmother's mother and how that would have impacted my grandmother. And then that directly impacted my mother, and kind of starting to, as I get older, just appreciate that there was so much more than I ever really understood about what I was kind of taught and the stories that I then internalized and what I came to believe. And now having a daughter and raising her on the other side of the world, there's all of these like interesting parts of that where like some of it is really like who I am. Some of it I get to go, no, that stops here, or that story doesn't continue anymore. So I feel like it's a new understanding that kind of makes sense a little bit of who I am and who they are, and just why I ended up the way I ended up, why certain things happened, why decisions were made.
When do you feel like you made that shift and started to become aware that there was this belief holding you back from embracing your creative path more fully? And when you started to understand that, oh, I don't have to be in advertising to make money as a writer. When did that start to shift for you?
Too late. Like literally the last few years, honestly. And I think I can say this now with more clarity, but I truly believe that the majority of my 20s, I was still living in survival. I've done a lot of work around like ancestral trauma and money trauma. And I really think that until recently, I had this unhealthy relationship with money where I was just always scared that it was going to leave and it was never going to come back. And it was this finite resource because
Mhm.
that's how I grew up. That's what I saw. That's what I lived. There was never enough. There was never enough time and there was never enough money for me growing up. I'm one of six. In my house growing up, there were four of us, but I have another brother and another sister, a younger sister that was born. That's a whole separate story. But it always seemed like whether it was my mom or my dad, there was never enough time. My dad was building businesses and like failing and starting over and trying all of these. He's always been in like the same industry. He's a salesman, he's a marketer. And then my mom was always creativity was the stuff that we do when we enjoy. My mom reads four, five, six books at a time. It's not surprising how I ended up who I ended up. But that was like playtime, and her editing and writing was playtime. And she was, training to be a nurse. She would, be at university all day and working in the hospital all night. And so it just felt like everything was finite. We lived in this like permanent scarcity, and that took years in my adult life to unravel. That was like so, 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 so deep. So I feel like it's really only in the last few years where I've started to realize that, like, my God, everything I've done has been creative. Everything, every decision that I've made, how I've built my life, how I've built my business, the work that I've done, the work that I do with clients, it all is very deeply creative. Even marketing alone, you speak to the most, I don't want to, but how do we explain that? The most typical advertising person that you could think of that maybe follows like very typical methods and strategies is still a very creative person. Whether they would admit that or not is a different story. So certainly the way I've been doing it is very, very creative, very feeling first, very deep, very people first, very kind of I get people to tap into a whole new level of like who they are and why they do what they do. That's always just been like part of my curiosity. It's always been a part of my process. So I think consciously I realized this probably after right around the time that I gave birth to Ollie. So he just turned 4. So let's say in the last 4 years of business, I've really let my creativity lead. I started writing my book again. I have like a novel I have a few that I've been working on over the years and have never published. That day will come, I'm sure of it. But it's one thing that I've had this just very interesting relationship with for my entire life. Like if my best friend was listening to this right now, she would tell you, like since I was 18, I've been writing books and I've been going, oh, I'll finish this one and I'll publish this one next year. That's just been my famous story. And I never have. And that definitely, definitely is directly related to, oh, but that's for fun. That's not like a work thing. So that can only happen when all of the work stuff is done. And over the last 4 years, and certainly through the creation of creative living and the conversations that I've been having with the people that I've worked with over the last couple of years, has created this new version of me where through all of these processes and methods and teachings that I've done, I know that whether the creative output, the end result, the thing that I end up with makes me money, it directly impacts everything in my life and therefore will directly impact my success, whatever that looks like. So the relationship that I've built to it now, let's say over the last 4 years, is more sort of I take the creative practice as seriously as anything that feels like business. And I coach my clients to do the same. We've got to let go of this attachment to everything must be profitable, it must convert, it needs to make money or it doesn't count. because the more time and attention and dedication and devotion that you give to your creative practice, your voice, the things that live in your underbelly that you just have never really found an outlet for before, the book that you want to write, the poetry that you feel called to, these things that kind of tickle the more creative side of your brain that sometimes don't make sense, the more you allow those to exist alongside everything else, the more successful you are. It might not feel like a direct relation at first, but absolutely, without a shadow of doubt, I've seen that too many times with too many people for it not to be true. So I started taking my creativity that seriously in kind of postpartum with my second child. This is my lifeline right now. It's the thing that reminds me who I am and that I'm a whole person and that I don't just exist as a mother or a business owner or a savior to my clients. There is a whole creative side of me that needs to be explored. And the more seriously I took that, the better my ideas got, the better my ideas got, the more attention my work got, the more successful I was, the more I enjoyed doing marketing, the more I enjoyed doing marketing, the more I show up and actually do it. And then it all just became very clear to me over the last few years of like, oh, these things have always been related. They're not separate things, they're not modular, they're all part of me. And they've all been essential to my success. I just wasn't taking the creative side of me as seriously as I probably should have.
I've always loved writing and I put it on the back burner for so many reasons, but one was because I felt like it was just this superfluous thing that wasn't deserving of my time and attention. And it is so interesting how so many of us have this connection to creativity and joy, and therefore no money, and how
Yeah,
money and joy can't be together.
they are
And
separate.
and that's something I'm really working on right now. And just joy in general, allowing myself to feel joy and my creative practice, especially writing specifically, is such a foundational piece of my joy and allowing myself to take that seriously. And I feel like creative living was that turning point for me where I was like, okay, I'm deciding I'm a writer and I'm going to take my writing practice seriously. And that truly changed my life. And I think also because a lot of my life centers around intuition and helping people live guided by their intuition
Oh,
and really leaning into that for myself, I have noticed how when I take my creativity seriously and really focus on that, my intuition gets even stronger.
yeah.
So I'm curious what your relationship is like with your intuition and how that maybe connects to creativity for you.
Ooh, that's such a good question. So I actually have chills right now. I feel like this is the witchiest side of me. Like I always joke with friends. Xanthi and I, we were joking about this at my last retreat that like we're very logical, sensible women. We're very, we believe in science and believe in data and witnessing things in order for them to be true. And like there's this whole side of me that is so witchy that like I am obsessed with astrology and I am obsessed with understanding not just how I work. I don't think it's really necessarily. I love human design, and human design is scarily accurate, but there's something about astrology that feels collective to me. Like it feels like this energy of it's so ancient and so deep. I hate using the word feminine because that doesn't feel right, but you know what I mean? It's very sort of maternal. It feels kind of nurturing and soft and old and wise. But I really believe that I've had this superpower my whole life. I remember one of my very first coaches. I was leading a team of copywriters in an advertising agency that I used to work in. And they got me a coach because, like, I was a baby at that point. And they were like, we'll get you a coach and we'll teach you how to lead and all of these different things. And she was like very logical too, a very sensible woman. And she was a sales coach and she was a advertising coach and she was a leadership coach. And it was very corporate and professional. And I remember her saying to me, you have a superpower. And I was like, Samantha, are you okay? She was like, I've never met anyone who has such a deep connection to their intuition. There's something about how you talk to yourself and connect to yourself that's really cool and unique. And I don't see that a lot in many people. And I think that's a superpower in your leadership. And that was years ago. We're talking more than 10 years ago now. And I remember her asking me about that. How do you sort of tap into that? How do you kind of listen to yourself? And I was like, well, I write. Maybe that's a thing. I hadn't really connected the dots too much at that point. I remember her saying something like, please never stop writing. And I spoke to her not too long ago. She found me on Facebook and we kind of connected. She is a brilliant woman, was definitely really influential to me at an important point in my career. And I remember her and I connecting not too long ago, a few years ago, and who's her asking me, are you still writing? Creative writing, right? And me being like, well, I've kind of like mesh the two things. And now I do this creative copywriting thing. And anyway, she was all over it. But that was really the first time that I realized that my connection to my intuition was a superpower. And I really do believe, like, I always thought that people were just able to do that. That most people were in conversation with themselves and most people were able to kind of decide whether something was a good decision. And like, it's really not that common. And I've made some crazy decisions in my life. You look at it now and it's like, oh, the story all worked out. But there was many decisions that I made at the time where people in my life were like, wait, what? I remember speaking to a friend of mine when I was like, I've met this guy. I'm going to move to Costa Rica. I'm just going to stay here. This feels like home. I don't know. It doesn't make sense, but it feels right. And I'm going to follow it. And I remember one of my friends being like, okay, this feels like a very Lois thing. So we're just going to accept it and we'll be here for you no matter what. And one of my best friends, who is literally science, like she's the walking embodiment of science. She is a doctor, a medical professional.
Mm.
And we always joke that she's science and I'm the other thing. And I remember at the time her just being like 100% so on board with it. And she would never move to the jungle and live in Costa Rica and just randomly make these decisions. But for me, she was like, yeah, I believe you. I trust you. I believe you because this is how you make decisions and it always works out for you. I've realized over the last few years that that is a deep connection to your intuition. It's kind of knowing and feeling, being able to feel, is this the right move for me? It's served me miraculously in my business and it's helped me to build a life that I actually fantasized about one day. Always thought I'd end up in Spain, ended up speaking Spanish, just different side of the world, but always had this idea that England was not my home. The northwest of England is very grey and rainy and cold, and it wasn't for me.
Mm.
And, and I believe that how I've cultivated that relationship with my intuition, and who knows, right? I can only tell you what I believe. I don't know that I could ever tell you, like, this is my process or this is my method, but this seems to have worked for me. And I believe the reason is because I've had that writing practice for so long. And it's something I started introducing into my work with clients for the first few years of my freelance career. The messaging and copywriting work that I was doing was very, very corporate. I was working with private equity firms, I was working with big advertising agencies. Even when I started moving into this sort of online space, when it was becoming something about 10 years ago, I was still working with the very kind of corporate coaches of the world. Even in those days, I was bringing a lot of this introspective writing, this kind of explorative, let's connect to your intuition, let's figure out what it is that you actually want to say here without having the language to describe what I was doing. Now that I've started to, over the last 6, 7 years, document why did this work with that particular client? What was the process here? How did we get to that, that important message? Why was this particular thing so successful? And I've started to reverse engineer some of those things. I really do think that having a consistent writing practice is a superpower because it connects you to your intuition, because it allows you to stay really deeply connected to yourself. I can make pretty quick decisions about opportunities, environments, people, big decisions, whatever it might be. Creative living is the perfect example of that. We moved fast when we created that. I was following Maya on Threads and I was just like, oh my God, I love this person. And I reached out to Maya on Instagram. I think we chatted for like 2 days and we were like, we need to do a collaboration. And it literally was just, yes, this, yes, this. The name was like, we never second guessed any of it. There was never a moment where we're like, oh, we don't know what the name should be, or oh, we don't know how to deliver it. We knew this thing had to exist. And both Maya and I, the thing that we have in common is that we both have had this connection to relationship with ourselves through writing. And it was the last few years where I've really realized, like, oh, that has been the biggest difference in my life. That has been the thing that has influenced most of my decisions. It's where I go when I am grieving. It's where I go when I'm confused. It's where I go when I haven't quite got the language for something yet. And I'll either do something really creative or I will specifically create myself some kind of prompt where I'll leave it for a day or two and then come back to it and sit with myself in this conversation. And I usually find answers. And it's not like I find all the right answers for everything and make all good decisions all the time. That would be wonderful. But whether the answer ends up being the right one or not, it keeps me in this path on this direction that feels true to me in the moment. So even if it ends up being the wrong decision or even if it ends up not working out, it always feels like it's okay. We just keep moving because it's fine. I made the decision based on me, who I was in that moment, what felt true to me. And that always feels like the right decision, whether it goes right or not. There's always something for you in that experience. Maybe it's a lesson, maybe it's something that you don't want, maybe it shapes the next decision for you. I really do believe that's what writing has given me, not just writing for others, but writing for me and myself and sitting with myself too.
And it makes so much sense because it allows us to really hear our inner voice. It just tunes out the noise. And I think that that's where people get disconnected from their intuition is because they're too busy listening to other people, too connected to other people's voices and opinions. And writing really hones in on what's coming from ourselves. No matter what decision we make, we can walk through it with confidence because we know it was ours.
Exactly.
And I think that that's such a core difference. And that kind of speaks to something I really wanted to talk to you about, which is knowing when to share certain things. There's long been this saying of speak from the scar and not from the wound. And I've been sitting with that for a while, especially recently as I'm navigating different things and wanting to share from the in between and
Mm.
the imperfect and the not yet sure and just the messy middle of it all. And you've been going through a lot in your own life as well, and you've been sharing from the messy middle. And so I'd
Mm.
just love to hear about that process for you and just what that's looked like and felt like.
The thing with the kind of share from the scar and not from the wound is I think it kind of assumes that there will be a scar. Sometimes the wound doesn't leave a scar. Sometimes it's not deep enough or big enough or profound enough that it will even leave a scar. So by the time you've waited, it doesn't feel relevant anymore, and then you didn't say anything. Or the other side of that is the wound is so gaping and so large and so infinite that you feel like this is never going to scar over, which has kind of felt like my year, to be honest, since pretty much February. And so, with that philosophy, you can find yourself in a place where, even if you're doing a lot of writing for yourself, I really do feel that there is healing in the sharing process. And that can be terrifying. But I think that part of the ability to address complex ideas and unmuddle some of the confuddliest, confusing, most tangled thoughts in your mind, part of that process happens in the letting go of it. And the letting go of it happens when we put it out there. If we always assume that there will be a neat little scar that we can share from at the end, we're also robbing ourselves of an opportunity to really actually properly let go. And so for me, oversharing has always been part of my healing process. It's in my astrology, it's in my human design, it's part of the very makeup of who I am, which makes a lot of sense. And I had the hardest. Yeah, I think of my life. I think this was probably personally, physically, the hardest year of my life. I have either been pregnant or mourning a pregnancy since February of this year. So we're now in September. And so physically, emotionally, hormonally, it has just been a cocktail of absolute what the fuck moments. Sometimes I'm like, this is fine, I'm healed, I'm good. And then the next day I'm absolutely physically exhausted or crying, or I have these recurring hormonal headaches. A lot of it is stuff that you can't just move through and wait for the scar. It doesn't really exist. I didn't realize I was pregnant sort of February, March until April, and then lost the baby. And then around that time learned that I actually can't have another baby. So it was like this acute level of grief because I had a couple of days of learning that I was pregnant before I learned that I wasn't anymore, where I was like coming to terms with the idea of having a third baby and oh my God, maybe we can do this. I am blessed to already have two beautiful, healthy children. And so I kind of got myself like excited about it and then had to deal with the kind of, oh, this isn't going to happen because it's not safe for my body. There's lots of things going on with me that makes pregnancy just not a good idea right now. Or, I'm 37, so really ever again. And so I went on this kind of really profound journey of grief and physical fallout and big, deep realizations. And It was definitely hard for a while. I feel a lot better now, but came back to this place of gratitude of like, I am so fortunate that I was able to have two healthy pregnancies and deliver naturally and have these two incredibly smart, funny, kind, brilliant children. And I am okay with what the universe has blessed me with, and I am grateful for that. And I don't think I will ever be over this. I don't think this is something, I don't want to be over it. I don't think this is something that I will just forget and it will become a nice, neat little scar. And if someone's going through fertility hardship, I will just go, oh, well, once that happened, like I think as women, whether you choose to be a mother or not, we all have our own experiences with this. Even my friends who have decided consciously not to have children have been through really deep experiences, journeys with grief of kind of coming to terms with the fact that they won't be parents or they won't be a mother because from kids we're kind of, especially us that are in this sort of millennial gap, have been like, led to believe that that was our life purpose. And so whether you choose to or not, or you tried and you couldn't, or you have a hard time, or it comes really easy, there's just so much grief that comes with this idea, this sort of experience with motherhood, nurturing, caring for, or being seen as someone who can care for young children, babies. And I believe that the experience of motherhood for me and grief have like allowed me a level of depth and humanity and pain and life experience that will directly impact my work for the rest of my life. And I am grateful that I've been through these experiences, and I'm grateful that I'm alive enough to feel these experiences. I know that there are many other much more horrifically tragic stories than mine. With everything that's happening in Palestine, Ukraine, Sudan right now, I think about all of these mothers that have been through unexplainable, impossible tragedy, irreparable tragedy. And I think to myself, how selfish to believe that I can just wait and sit on the sidelines and one day it'll be a nice, neat little scar and I won't have to worry about it anymore. And I can just share these pretty little snippets with other people and hope that that will be enough. Like, no, I want to sit in the mess sometimes and I want to go there and I want to be human and I want my work to feel deeply human. And sometimes that is so messy and chaotic. One thing that I teach a lot of my clients, especially in Sweet Talk, because Sweet Talk is my most intimate program where we do a lot of writing. And one thing that I always say to clients is that when we talk about like a writing practice or sitting in conversation with yourself or writing through the mess, I feel like that kind of can feel a little bit confusing. Like, when we hear the word writing, most people think communication. When you hear writing or to write, it's like, oh, I'm creating something that someone else will read. But actually, a lot of the time, all we're doing is documenting. Sometimes, if I feel like I really have nothing to give today, that's usually a place where I might want to sit and explore that. And instead of being like, what profound idea can I come up with? Or what do I need to say that somebody else needs to hear? Literally, I sat here the other day, not too long ago, and I sat on a chair where I can see my front door and these two big open windows, and there's a massive guava tree in front of my door. And the light falls through it in a really beautiful way in the morning. It's very romantic, and I just love sitting there and looking at it, and the breeze is coming in. And I just sat there and described the leaves. That was all I had to give. But that allows me to keep this kind of this documentation of how I feel on any specific day or any specific moment. It allows me to keep this temperature check on, is today a day where it feels like I can share from this space, or is today a day where I just need to document the coffee ring on the table or the sound of my heart when I lie down in one of my moments where I just need to lie down and stop talking? Or do I actually have something that I can share today? I've kind of come to this conclusion through this experience specifically that I think waiting for the scar is a privilege that many people do not have. And I don't want my work to come from a privileged place. I don't want it to come from perfect healing. I don't want it to be clean and tidy and perfect and never human. And I'm not saying that everybody has to do that, right? Because I think there's also a lot of deeper relationship here with your past and your story and your experiences, and only you get to decide what you want to share. But if more of us can find the tools, support, practice, awareness, space to be able to share more of what we're experiencing when we're experiencing it. Not only will we be more deeply connected to ourselves and our work and our purpose and the things that we're maybe supposed to share and what should come out and what deserves to exist outside of our minds, but we'll also start to fill the world with better conversations, with things that don't have perfect beginnings and perfect endings, and more real, honest, in the moment. This is shit. Like sometimes being human is really shit. If we convince ourselves that in order to be consumable, in order for our work and our art to have earned its right to exist somewhere in public, it must be a perfect, neat scar. There are going to be times in your life where you will never create or share anything, and that is a tragedy. That is absolutely tragic because you're robbing yourself of an opportunity to say something that might just need to exist outside your mind. And the more you hold on to those things, they don't go away. Those things don't disappear, right? If I hadn't written through my grief this year, I would still be in the depths of it right now. I know that for sure. I know that for sure. I know it had a deep part in my healing process. If I had waited to feel good and I had waited to feel healed and I'd waited to feel ready, I'd probably be still very deeply, deeply in the pain now. And why rob yourself because you feel like everything you create needs to be perfectly consumable? Some of the most interesting things I have ever read in my entire life career has been a question, has been just someone surviving themselves. Like sometimes that is just the most painfully beautiful work that you can experience. And had many of these creatives and artists said, I'm just going to wait until this makes sense, the world would never have got the opportunity to read some of that stuff. I've read a lot on grief this last 6 months. The more that I read about grief and the more that I dance with my grief and build a relationship with my grief and my fear and my mess, the more I realized that, thank God, these people didn't wait until they were finished in their healing process or until they were perfect and ready and the wound was a neat little scar, because you can tell it's so breathtakingly human and in the moment. And I think because of the years that I've spent in conversation with myself and writing, I write every single day without fail. I'm writing every single day. That has just become a part of my life. If I don't write in the morning, I can tell by the afternoon that there's stuff that I just need to get out of my head. And I think because I've built that relationship with my words and my writing, I have been able to develop this ability to say, this is something that I can share, and this is something that's just for me. I haven't shared a lot in this last 6 months. I mean, recently I've started sharing a little bit more, but in the last 6 months, I haven't shared as much as I usually would. And the stuff that I am sharing or have shared has been about my process or my grief or this experience of just feeling creatively up against the wall. And whether you have been through grief or postpartum or a relationship ending or a relationship beginning, it doesn't even have to be sadness. Whatever, if you've been through a kind of life-changing experience, your relationship to your creativity will change in that moment because you become different. Your identity changes. Who you believe you are, what you believe you're capable of, all of this changes. So because you are stepping into a newer version of you, the relationship, the existing relationship that you have with your creativity and your voice will naturally change. And it will take a minute for you to decide who that person is and what that person sounds like and what that person talks about. And so we enter these kind of void phases where your relationship with your creativity is changing. And you can often be like, oh my God, is it ever going to come back? I had those moments this year where I was like, I didn't even feel this disconnected from my voice in postpartum, which was like a whole damn journey. This was like a really intense version of postpartum that was just extended and kept going because I had these two back-to-back miscarriages and then a complete hormonal crash. And I sometimes was like, oh my God, well, my voice is gone. It's never going to come back. And I, of course, in those moments now can tell myself, Lois, that's not true. It's coming and it's going to be different and it's going to be deeper and it's going to sound a little bit more like you. There's a newer, realer version of you that's just waiting to come through. You just haven't got full access to her yet. And I think if we can write through it and share through it and let some of that mess exist in conversation with what's happening culturally and what's happening in our communities and what other people are experiencing, we get more answers and we start to realize, okay, there is this newer version of me coming through. This sounds a little bit different, but it's still me. And you can move through it faster.
There's so much that you just said that I really have to sit with for myself because I feel like in a lot of ways I'm going through this in my own life right now. I feel my voice changing. I feel a different part of me wanting to be expressed, and it's had me thinking and overthinking like what I'm sharing and what I'm creating. And I think that one reason why sharing in that unknown in between space is so hard for us is one, because a lot of us taught, like you were speaking to, that we need to show up perfect and
Mm.
packaged and like we know everything and wanting to be perceived in a certain way. And
Hmm.
also that we want this consistency. You were also talking about the fact that as we change and evolve, our creativity is going to, and our relationship to it is going to. And also just the way that the creative cycle ebbs and flows in of itself. And that's so challenging for us because we want this consistency. We want to know every day I'll wake up and feel creative in this way and produce in this way, and my voice will sound like this. And that's just not how it works.
Oh
And
my God, no.
so I think that that's another reason why creativity can be such a transformative and challenging relationship because it requires us to embrace change.
Uh-huh, exactly. And it requires us to live in the void sometimes. How beautiful would it be if you could just schedule your creativity? Not a switch that can just be turned on. There is no, I just access this when I want to. In my younger years, studying creative writing and then studying journalism and fancying myself a bit of a scholar and a bit of a writer, I read so much of these literary greats of how their minds worked and how they accessed their creativity and what were their rituals like and what were their processes like. If you look at literally any of the sort of brilliant writers or artists, any painter too in the history of ever of human existence, all of them say pretty much the same thing. They get up and show up and sit with their voice no matter what. Virginia Woolf would say she would always go to this hotel room and she would go from, I forget what the time, I think it's something like 9 to 3 or something, I forget. Hemingway would wake up every single morning and at 7, or sometimes he would even wake up earlier, like 4 or 5 a.m. and start writing before his brain could start thinking and telling himself, like, oh, this needs to be a good idea. And so they would show up for their work and they would show up for their words, but there were many, many times where nothing came out or they would sit and overanalyze everything they'd created. There's a really famous example of an author who, in the midst of writing a novel that became one of his most famous works, he's also writing in his journal and he's saying things in his journal like, this is awful. This is the worst work that I've ever created. This is going to be terrible, but I'm going to keep writing anyway. And so I feel like there's so much that we can learn from the people who went before us. And one thing that I've always tried to bring into my work is I'm going to show up and I'm going to be okay with it if nothing happens. And I was challenged so deeply on that philosophy this year. And I don't think I've even scratched the surface of what my creative work is capable of. I've learned to create this balance of I'm going to show up and I'm going to take it seriously. And I'm going to take my rhythms seriously and I'm going to take my routine seriously. And at the very same time, I'm going to not take myself seriously at all. And I'm going to not take these ebbs and flows seriously at all. And I'm going to let them mean whatever they need to mean. And learning how to share the process as I'm experiencing it, learning how to say, this did not work for me today, so here's what I did. Or here's a stream of questions that I'm asking myself to keep myself on track. Or here's something that I'm exploring that I still don't know yet. Or here's a question that I keep asking myself and I've never been able to find the answer. I found that in doing that, I can have this balance of take the work seriously, take the time that you spend on it seriously enough so that you will show up no matter what, and also don't take it too seriously. Whatever you have to give in this moment right now is what you have to give, and that's what counts. So show up. It's such an interesting time to be a creative as well, because Hemingway wasn't expected to show up to his Paris apartment, his desk, looking out over the rooftops of Paris, and create a reel about his process. He would disappear for months and work on his project, and that would be his cocoon and his shell, and he would be in his little rhythms and his routines. And then he would go into the publishing phase. And then the publishing phase was when things were getting marketed and he was being perceived more publicly and his work was being judged. And these authors would like retract and go back into their creative caves again. And I think there's something to be said for that. I do try and sort of adopt this rhythm a little bit of like, if I'm not posting consistently, it's okay. Like, I don't post every day on Instagram. I've never, it's not in my blood to be able to do that. And some weeks on Substack, I share 3 times and then I don't show up for 5 weeks. I really think there's something to say about seasons and allowing yourself to exist within your own process instead of trying to pathologize it and make sense of it and optimize it and making every part of your life a rigid ritual so that maybe you can convince this little beast of creativity to show up and be nice to you a little bit more often than you would like. And the more I've come to terms with that, the more frequently the creative beast visits. The more I stop trying to chase it and wrangle it and make it do what I want it to do when I want to do it, the more I just go, all right, I'm going to show up. I'll be here. So if you come, like that would be nice. The more frequently it shows up. This year, it's been really challenging and it's been a beautiful lesson for me in like when I let go, when I surrender, when I share things I'm not sure about, and when I exist in the conversation and not just the end point, and I write from the messy middle, the creative beast will come back more frequently and faster than it has before. It's spiritual, being a very logical, sensible woman. It's spiritual. There's just something holy about it. There's something so unexplainable about it. And like everything that's unexplainable in our lives, we cannot force it and wrangle it into submission. We have to dance with it and let it be its own thing outside of our bodies.
I could not agree with everything you just said more. And I think that part of what allows it to come back is because we allow it to not always be there. I allow myself to be in the moment where it feels disconnected and drained. I allow myself to be in that phase of my cycle. And so then it can come back because that's all part of it.
That is your creativity. That's your incubation phase.
Exactly. That's part of the creativity is not feeling creative.
I think that's an important distinction. I'm so guilty of this. We label those phases of like, oh God, I just have nothing to give. What is going on with me? I'm pretty sure I've said on voice notes to friends and peers and people that I talk to, Maya, Xanthi, one of my best friends, I'm pretty sure I've said recently, like, I just don't know what's wrong with me. Like, I just can't get it back. And in those moments, I catch myself and I'm like, Lois, that is the problem. You are talking about this phase as if it is not part of the process. You are just integrating. You're just in your incubation phase and you've been through something traumatic and big and life-changing and soul shifting. And that just takes a little bit of a longer incubation phase because there's more stuff that needs to settle. There's more stuff that needs to find its way into your soul before you can really start to articulate it. That just makes sense when you go through something that's kind of life changing or you go through a big decision or you spend so much time in your own mind anyway as a creative. As creatives, we just need time to simply exist. And I think when we go through something massive that shakes the ground underneath you, you're just going to need a little bit longer of an incubation phase. And I think if we wait too long, we start to convince ourselves that it's never coming back. That's where we've got to try and learn. All right, the ground's still shaking a little bit, but what do I have right now? Is there a rock or a stone or something that I can hold on to for this moment that I can explore for this moment? And then that creative beast that's over there in the corner and kind of like starting to work her way back over. If I just pretend I'm not looking at her, maybe she'll start to like grace me with her presence again. Instead of being like, oh, I don't feel creative right now, or oh, what's wrong with me? It's like, no, I'm just in incubation. I'm in the part where I stop. As long as I just let go and surrender to the part where I stop and I give myself what I need in those moments. And of course, it's so hard for those of us who do have our reputation, livelihood, identity, money wrapped up in that creative energy a lot of the time. Of course, it can feel scary when we go into an incubation phase. Like, oh God, now what? Does that mean everything stops? So we have to try and find a way to dance with those moments where maybe you're not creating your best work at those times, but whatever you're creating in that phase is important. You are still a creative. You are still talented. You do still have the skills and the tools and the depths that you need to bring whatever the next phase or vision looks like for you to life. Whether it feels like you're on the ball 100% or not, you absolutely do have that in you. It is there. It is coming to shape in a new way. It's going to present itself in a way that you absolutely were not expecting. Your voice is going to start to sound different. Some of the writing that I've been doing recently, I'm surprising myself. I wrote something the other day and I was like, oh shit, I sound different. I sound deeper in a way, but I'm also noticing that I'm kind of desiring to be a little bit more ridiculous too. There's a part of me after all of this depth and darkness and hardship over the last 6 months that's like, I just want to fucking laugh again. And so I'm finding surprising parts of myself coming back, and I'm letting the chips fall where they may and allowing them to present themselves. I feel like since February, I've been on this journey and I'm starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm starting to create with the same veracity that I'm used to. And I'm starting to feel like, okay, I'm creating stuff that I feel excited about again. And I think that's why I allowed it to take shape however it took shape. And I didn't stop sharing by any means. I continued creating things within conversation of whatever was happening around me in that moment, trying to be super present, letting go of the pressure of trying to be that Lois that I was 6 months ago, letting go of ideal timelines and deadlines and how things are supposed to look. And I'm starting to climb back into this different version of me and I'm excited again, which is really cool. I'm excited about the person that I'm climbing back into. Yeah, I'm different now. I'm a little older, I'm a little wiser, I'm a little more beat up, but I like her. And I feel like she has some stuff to teach me that I still haven't quite figured out yet. And so just trying to let that creative beast be whatever it needs to be right now in this moment.
It truly is like you are speaking right to me. Every single thing you said in this entire conversation, and I deeply appreciate it.
That's actually another really cool technique that I tell clients is in the messy middle, just speak whatever you need to hear. Often, whatever it is that we need to hear, someone else needs to hear it too. And so sometimes that's enough in the messy middle is like, what do I need to hear right now? What would I love someone to just grab me by the shoulders and say? And it can be a really cool way to not snap ourselves out of it because I hate the language of that. I hate that it feels like it has to be rushed and quick and done and fast, but slowly cajole ourselves back to life is like, what do you need to hear right now? Some of the content that I've created that has gone the furthest has just been me speaking to myself, saying whatever I need to hear in that moment. And it happened to be something that somebody else needed to hear too. Usually is because I can usually be brutally honest to myself. If you're feeling how I've felt over the last few months, first of all, I get it. Like, oh my God, it's hard. I know. And there is wisdom here to be found, and it probably is hiding somewhere. I have a client who calls this the creative elephant in the room. And I love that expression. There is a creative elephant in the room, usually when we feel like this, that needs to be spoken or written or explored, and you're not exploring it for some reason. There's a reason that you're not going there. It probably feels a little bit too recent or a little bit too heavy, or it just doesn't feel clear. You're like, all right, I see the elephant, but I don't know how to even deal with that. So following those little crumbs that your past self or future self is leaving for you, and probably someone else needs to hear it.
It allows you also to be really present with yourself in the process, in the moment that you're in.
Because of the age of creativity that we live in, we get so stuck. We like living in the past and living in the future. We have a launch coming up, or there's something that we do want to write about, or we have these content ideas planned in. It's all just so mechanical. And we either get stuck in the past, looking at all of the things that worked before, or we get stuck in the future, trying to decide what we should create and what we need to do and what needs to sell and all of these things. There is just so much power in this current moment right now, letting go of all of that. And you get to decide what you actually want to share, but you won't know if you want to share it unless you get it out anyway. So you might as well write through it, even if it's just a sentence. I always say to my sweet talk clients, if you ever get stuck, if there's ever a moment where you're like, I have nothing to give today, write one sentence, one true sentence. That's a trick that I stole from Hemingway. He gets asked about writer's block, and his response is something along the lines of, if I'm ever not sure, I'll look out of my window and like at the rooftops of Paris. It's something like this, the quote. And so it's very romantic when you imagine it, right? And I just find the truest sentence that I can. I just write the truest sentence and I go from there. And I love that so much. And it never fails me. Some of my best writing has come from just a true sentence. And sometimes it's just the sentence itself needed to exist outside my mind. That has been my whole year. The universe was like, oh, you want to teach this? We need to challenge you a little bit first if you actually want to be able to teach people these things. And so it's been horrible at times and really, really hard. And I'm starting to see the lessons there and be like, okay, this is just going to make my work more powerful. And this is just going to make my ability to support others through similar things more important. And I'm practicing all of these things in real time and they work. And so it's a good reminder.
You can hear the power in your voice that only comes from living it. And I
Yeah.
think that goes really well into our last question, which is living intuitively wild means connecting to your true self and living dedicated to who you are at your core, no matter what. How do you feel like you live intuitively wild?
I think the best way I do it is that I don't try. I'm changing all the time. I've met so many different versions of myself, even just over the last year. Never mind the last 10 years or 20 years. And who knows who I'm going to meet over the next 10 or 20 years. For a long time, certainly in my 20s, resisted becoming new versions. Hardcore, I think as humans we naturally do, but I'm like very resistant to change. The older I get, the more I accept all versions of me, new versions of me. Someone I might be on a Wednesday, I might not be anymore on a Friday. And don't make it mean anything about my skill or ability or talent or whether I'm going to get closer to that vision in my mind or the work that I want to do. And I think the less that I resist becoming new versions of myself, the more layers of me that I meet and the more powerfully I'm able to support others through those many transitions that I watch all of these amazing creatives that I work with go through too. So I think that is my definition of being true is don't hold on to one identity. Don't pretend that you have to be one thing. Don't label yourself or give yourself a story that you feel you need to stick to because it will change. And it is okay to evolve in public. You can still accept that you might be a different person next week or believe something differently in 6 months from now and still share who you are in this moment and still share from this place where you are right now. When I was writing about my miscarriage back in June to share on Substack, there was a part of me that was like, I don't know if I want to share this because A, I don't know if I'm going to feel the same way about grief this time next year. Surely my relationship to it is going to change. Right now, it feels very heavy and dark, and what if I don't feel like that a year from now? And then there was another part of me that was like, what if this isn't someone else's experience with grief? I don't want to tell people how to experience their grief. And so I think with being intuitively wild, being true to you right down to your core, there's going to be very human parts of your ego that will say, but this might not be right, or this might not be right next week, or this might not be right for someone else. And it'll slow you down and prevent you from sharing who you are in this moment. That is my thing. Don't try and live up to anyone's expectations, even your own. Resist the need to define yourself in any one way permanently. And you'll meet so many versions of you that you love and so many things that you can do that you maybe never thought you could do. I know that author identity is waiting in the wings and there's parts of me that I'm yet to explore. I think that's the best way to do it. I'm just going to surrender to whatever I am in this moment and whatever might come next in my story and whatever, and not make that mean too much about me or my ability to live the life that I want.
Something I try to say to myself every day is how can I allow myself to just be who I am in this moment? How can I just meet myself new today and with curiosity and acceptance and excitement versus judgment or fear or criticism for not being who I was yesterday?
I think the world that we live in right now, we need more people who are willing to let go of stories and identities and structures that don't serve them, you know? I think a
Hmm.
lot of the problems that we've seen in the world right now and a lot of the shit shows that we've got ourselves into is like past generations who cling tightly to identities and stories no matter what they're shown, no matter how rocked those stories and identities might be, no matter how much proof they have that those stories and identities and systems and structures are ineffective or not working or not good for them. So I think one thing that I definitely try to do imperfectly, but I hope to teach my kids is that you can let go of any belief or story or structure and you'll still be safe. You are always loved and safe, and it's okay to change, and it's okay to change your mind, and it's okay to become something new all the time, no matter your age, no matter where you are in the world, no matter what it is that you do or how far you've got yourself into something. If there's a newer, better, deeper, truer version of you waiting, don't ignore it, you know.
What a way to end. I could literally talk to you for hours longer. Thank
Same,
you.
that was so nice.
Thank you so much, love.
Thanks, mate. It was so nice to talk to you and have this convo. I loved it.
Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Intuitively Wild, the podcast. I hope it helped deepen your connection to yourself, sparked some insights, and inspired you to live intuitively wild. If you enjoyed this podcast, it would mean so much to me if you would share it with others and leave a rating and review. And please reach out to me. I would love to connect with you. I will see you next time for more magic.